Hey everybody, welcome in. Welcome everyone. As usual, we're going to wait a few minutes for folks to pour in since it's, right around dinner time and hopefully everyone's maybe fed or has food with them. But in the meantime, if you're here, welcome. And if you want, as you're joining, just drop in the chat sort of your name, maybe where you live, maybe anything else you want us to know, and get the chat started. And we'll just make sure that that feature works.
I'll go ahead and test it from my end.
Perfect.
Hi,
Perfect.
everyone. I'm Morrigan. I'm in Las Vegas. Well, I can't type that fast. Okay.
Okay.
I am just gonna double check. Oh wait, I'm a panelist, so it should work for
Right.
uh
If you want to try it one more time for us, hopefully that should be the trick. But
I do
uh,
on my last webinar there was an issue, so you might want to double check that it
look,
is open. Oh no,
we
here.
all let's zoom. Hey, there we go. Sweet. We're seeing names pour in. That's fantastic. Welcome everyone. We're going to give it just 1 or 2 more minutes, and then we are going to get it started. If you're just joining, we're asking everyone just to say hi, where you're calling in from, anything else you want us to know, and we appreciate you being here with us on this what is a rainy Thursday evening in Las Vegas. Something of a rare sight for us. All right, excellent. A lot of locals, but we got some folks from farther afield too, which is excellent. As far as Rapid City, South Dakota, I see. So fantastic. All right, we're just going to give it 1 or 2 more minutes. If you want to go grab some water, cup of tea, whatever, just make sure you're, ready to hang out for a little bit. That's great. Otherwise, we're going to get started with some introductions fairly soon. And yeah, looking forward to diving into this webinar with you all. All right. Well, folks are going to keep joining. We're 5 minutes after. Let's go ahead and get started. And maybe Marigan, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll take it from there, and away we go.
All right, yeah. Hi, everyone again. My name is Morrigan. I am the Restoration and Plant Stewardship Coordinator with Amargosa Conservancy, working, yeah, on habitat and stewardship out in the Amargosa. And I did a webinar last month about alkali wetlands and restoration, which is on our YouTube channel. And then this will also be put on our YouTube channel, so you can watch it again or get caught up, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, if you've been following us on social media the last couple of months, all that really great, especially Amargosa Nidorwort content, that's all Marigan from a lot of time in the field. Her field season on Nidorwort, at least, is coming to an end, but there are other species in bloom that she'll be keeping a close eye on. So thanks, Marigan. I'll take it from there, and we'll go ahead and share my screen just to make sure that's working.
And I'll be monitoring the chat for you, Mason, so when we're all done, we can take questions and all that good stuff.
Awesome. All right. Are you able to see my screen right now, Regan?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, so Regan will be monitoring the chat. Go ahead and throw in questions, thoughts through there. She'll pay attention to them and collect them at the end. We're gonna have some, plenty of time for Q&A. But let me start by introducing myself. I'm Mason Voehl. I am Amargosa Conservancy's campaigns director. I was the executive director for most of the last 4 years. And in this position, I am driving our advocacy and policy work, which, if you've been following us for the last few years, has been a full-time job. And it's continued to be a really exciting frontier. And that's why we're hosting tonight's webinar. We wanted to give you an update on where things are at in the Amargosa on a whole host of issues. We're calling this webinar Battles on the Bitter River. We've had plenty of battles the last couple of years. A lot of those are ongoing, so we're going to give updates on those issues. But it continues to be the case that our beloved Amargosa River is really the epicenter of some truly national and global conflicts surrounding natural resource extraction, renewable energy, we're navigating all of this in the midst of a administration change and administration with new policies, of course, a new general approach to public lands management. And we're going to touch on that and sort of how the Amargosa has this hotbed of activity right now, how the issues have changed and how we're dealing with that under this administration, and really just give you a sense of like this is what we're focusing on, because as I hope you're going to gain through this presentation, there are so many threats that we're trying to deal with all at once. And I think a big part of our a big challenge right now in the coming year is going to be, where do we put our focus? There's so many places that need an advocate. So we're going to break down sort of the ones we're focusing on, the exact role we play in these fights, and then we're going to end with how you can help us. And there are myriad ways you can help us. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. If it'll let me advance here. There we go. So if you're a new first timer to one of these webinars, we are Amargosa Conservancy. Our mission is to work toward a sustainable future for the river through science, stewardship, and advocacy. And that's that third pillar of our work that, of course, we're going to be focusing on tonight. So here's an overview of what I'm going to get into today. We're going to do a very brief Amargosa orientation based on the names I'm seeing in the chat. It seems like most of y'all are from the area, probably pretty familiar, but I always like to start there because it reminds me and everyone, I think, what the stakes are in the advocacy work. From there, we're going to talk about these battles on the river from Beatty to Badwater, with a real emphasis on the Save Ash Meadows campaign and the way that campaign has evolved. We're going to talk about this gold rush near the headwaters of the river. And then we're going to talk about solar and second chances. And that is a deliberately, kind of maybe a enticing title for that section. We're going to get into the renewable energy transition and how that's faring on the ground. And then we're going to end with, just as I said, focusing on here are our priority areas. This is where we're putting our energy, and how you can help us accomplish our goals in the coming year and beyond. So let's just get oriented quick to where we are. I always love maps. They remind me of a lot of things, but this is a great map of the Amargosa. The reason our organization exists is to work in this landscape that's 185 river miles. It's about a 4 million acre drainage area in terms of the greater watershed. It's a vast landscape, and it's a real patchwork of predominantly public land, mostly BLM land, but we also have national park lands with Death Valley National Park, Fish and Wildlife Service lands in Ash Meadows National Wildlife Refuge. And there's very little private property, but the private property that is there also plays a really big conservation role. So that is where we are. And why is this place special? Well, it's a biodiversity haven. It's home to over 80 endemic species of fish, plants, mammals, amphibians, invertebrates that live nowhere else in the world. That is a astonishing concentration of endemic life. It's the Galapagos of the desert. We have 25 species that are protected or threatened under the Endangered Species Act. And it's also really critical habitat for migratory birds. Morrigan happens to be an avid birder. So if any of you have bird questions just for fun, go ahead and drop those in the chat and just see what Morrigan can tell you. But that's why the Amargosa is so spectacular. And the biodiversity is really the shining virtue of the landscape. It's also an extremely important cultural landscape. We work very closely with the Timbisha-Shoshone tribe. It continues to be their homelands, but also for the Pahrump Paiute, Southern Paiute, Chemehuevi tribes. It is an extremely important cultural landscape as well, with a really rich history, and continues to be a vibrant, alive landscape for these peoples. It's also a place to call home for a broader community of 40,000 people from Beatty, Pahrump, Crystal, these communities in Nevada, and then Ferns Creek, Shoshone, and Tacopa. So it's 40,000 people, 4 million acres, give or take. And it's an amazing place to call home. So let us, with no further ado, let's get into the fights. And we're going to be kind of bouncing around the river tonight. We're not going to go from Beatty to Badwater. That'd be one way to do it. Instead, I thought we would do it on the basis of, these are our existing campaigns, sort of where we've put our energy the last couple of years. And start with Ash Meadows. As you all know, if you've been following us, this has been the heart of our advocacy work, because Ash Meadows is just a spectacular, special place, but also because the threats are so myriad. And we're going to give some updates on these fights. Some really, really positive. In general, actually, I think really positive. but some that are very concerning and that we're going to have to be creative in how we navigate. So let's get into the fight to save Ash Meadows. This all started in 2023, and we're not going to go into detail of these threats. Hopefully, you've been maybe following along for the last couple of years. But the Save Ash Meadows movement, if you will, began with one really bad project. It was a exploratory drilling project on the northern boundary of Ash Meadows on BLM lands, pitched by a Canadian company called Rover Critical Minerals. And at this time, there was a real boom in the lithium market around the West. This was an outgrowth of that. We had a speculative interest in lithium here in the Amargosa, and this is the project that was proposed. There's 30 boreholes down to 300 feet deep in extremely close proximity to the refuge's northernmost springs. The concern here was one bad borehole, and we could have a borehole situation in which we have an uncontrolled artesian flow that would forever change the hydrology of the region and put in peril all of the protected species in Ash Meadows. So this was I call it the lightning bolt that hit the river. This really woke us up to the vulnerabilities of Ash Meadows. This led us down. This is the actually area that was being considered. This, and if you drive on Invite Road towards Fairbanks Springs some days, look over on the northern side and look out for this big butte. It's very prominent, but this was the lithium-rich claystone that the company was after. And this was our big fear. In addition to the risks that exploration posed, the fear was, what if this led to an open pit mine? And that's certainly what the company had visions for, whether they would do it or they would flip this to a much larger company to develop an open pit mine. But this was existential, and we literally dropped everything we were doing to fight this fight, and we were really successful. I'm not going to go through the campaign beat by beat. Hopefully, you've been following along, but through a combination of a lot of public pressure, community organizing, through litigation alongside Center for Biological Diversity, this brought all of a sudden all of these different communities together, including conservation organizations like ours, but also the rural communities of Nye County, in Pahrump, Amargosa Valley, Beatty. I see that some of you are locals that are on this call. I can't tell you how truly amazing that was to see so many people from the region really kind of leap out of their chairs and go, this is unacceptable. We're not going to allow this level of risk to Ash Meadows. So this was really, I think, the thing that woke everybody up, and it was a must-win fight. It led to many places, including the halls of Washington, D.C., with our congressional members here in Nevada, taking a very public stand against this project. And ultimately, I have some really, really good news on that front. You may have seen the news just from this last month in August, but because of our engagement, because of the communities being very persistent, very vocal in their opposition of this project, including a very contentious town hall last year, wherein an executive from the company came in front of everyone, and the town let them know that they were very concerned about this project and that it really wasn't in their best interest. And all of that pressure, the litigation, the whole politics around this are such that the mining company, Rover Metals, has scrapped that plan. I actually got the confirmation yesterday. The BLM was approached by them to completely withdraw the application for that exploration. So this is a huge, huge win. And I think it's worth pausing and celebrating because these wins don't happen very often. And I think, again, it's such an interesting, important win, not just for our organization, but for the broader coalition of NGOs, rural communities, tribes. This was a big fight, and I think it's worth us pausing to celebrate that. So just want to make sure that everyone was aware of that really big update on that fight. It certainly was the biggest of my career. I think one of the biggest for our organization, and feels good to see that at least that one threat in that specific project has gone away. And I wouldn't be doing my job as an advocate without saying that we have not nullified the threat to Ash Meadows. Currently, this map depicts over 3,300 claims on BLM lands surrounding Ash Meadows for a variety of different minerals, lithium among them. This was just one of 3 or 4 speculative lithium claim areas that we continue to monitor. And of course, I think a big reason for this is the price of lithium has really has really changed. Lithium is currently at a kind of a market low because the global supply chain really was flooded in the last 6 months. Um, but who knows what the future holds? And it seems like this mineral is going to continue to be in high demand. And I think it would be a huge mistake for us to relax because as that price of that commodity changes, so does the interest. And these are all claims that hypothetically could be developed around the refuge. So the long and short of it is we have a long ways to go to ensuring that Ash Meadows is out of harm's way. And that leads to an update on sort of an outgrowth action that came out of this big fight surrounding Rover Critical Minerals project. The project made us very aware of these vulnerabilities to the refuge because the truth was these were lawful mining claims on BLM lands. When we designated the wildlife refuge at Ash Meadows, we really only protected the surface expression of the refuge in the actual oasis, the riparian habitat, the springs. But the way the Amargosa works is that all of that is an expression of a much larger hydrologic area. And the project proposed by Rover Metals illustrated that precarity, that a lot of that hydrological area is still unprotected, so to speak. It doesn't have robust conservation protections. These BLM lands are open for multiple use, and that includes mining. And mining it has a very strong legal basis. So the project that Rover proposed made us aware of that. And I think we all looked around and went, how do we ensure that this doesn't happen again and again and again? This was just one bad project from one company. What if there are more? And I will say, just working closely with the communities, just this one project took so many hours from so many people. Everyone is overwhelmed by the level of threat as it is. So we were exploring opportunities to enhance conservation protections of this region. And that led to a 18-month ish campaign in which we were calling on at the time, the Biden administration to take administrative action. And they had it within their authority to withdraw BLM lands or National Forest Service lands from new mineral entry for a period of up to 20 years. It's a temporary withdrawal. We felt this was a necessary, at least first step towards securing better conservation protections for Ash Meadows. And it was a means of basically stop putting the fire out, giving the communities the ability to not be dealing with projects like Rover had proposed again and again and again. So a mineral withdrawal removes a certain defined area from new mining for up to 20 years. And this was, we felt, essential. So a huge coalition of folks were animated around this. It was a truly bipartisan issue. We had conservation organizations, Amargosa Valley, Beatty, the County Board of Commissioners, Shoshone Tribe. We had almost all of our delegates in Congress at the time, including Senators Cortez Masto, Senator Rosen, Stephen Horsford, Susie Lee, Dina Titus, all of whom sent a letter to the Department of the Interior saying, we need you to do this. And this was really with about 6 or 7 months left of the administration. So this was a Hail Mary. I mean, this was an all-out sprint for us to make it perfectly clear that this process couldn't wait. We were very concerned about Rover and other actors continuing to push their interests in this landscape. And that led to the announcement I'm just going to back up 2 slides, in January 14th. So this is literally in the last 2 weeks of the Biden administration. We got the news that the Secretary of the Interior, Deborah Haaland, had put in a segregation. It's called a segregation notice for 309,000 acres of BLM land in the Amargosa Valley to be analyzed for a potential mineral withdrawal. So I want to make it crystal clear, if this is a new issue for you, this is not permanent protection. All this action is saying we are going to look at this area and through a public process, determine whether a mineral withdrawal is necessary, and then to determine the extent of that withdrawal. So it could, and generally is a much smaller area ends up ultimately being withdrawn than is initially analyzed. And that just has to do with a variety of factors, including natural resources, community values, all sorts of interests at play. But this was a buzzer beater, folks. I can just tell you, in conversations I had with the leadership at the National BLM at that time, the message to me was, look, at first, the first blush, they said, like, this is a great idea, but, we don't have time to do this. There are mineral withdrawal efforts that take 10, 20 years sometimes to get to this point where they're seriously being considered by leadership. Um, but I think the coalition was successful in that it impressed upon this leadership the urgency of the situation. This is an irreplaceable resource, and it just takes one or two bad projects to really threaten this extremely fragile ecosystem. So this action was a response to that, and I think truly the bipartisan, everyone thought this was just a common sense solution to what was an emerging problem in the region. This is a map depicting that area that was ultimately is ultimately being analyzed for a mineral withdrawal. And you can kind of see these landmarks. It's if you're driving on the 95, look for the big dune on the south side of the road, that all the way down to the Nevada-California state border, and then all the way over to Highway 160. So this is a sizable land area. And the process put in place is called segregation. So what that means is this area is currently segregated from kind of the general BLM management profile for a period of 2 years while the administration walks through the steps of the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, to determine whether it should be withdrawn. So basically, it's a 2-year pause button for the administration, the BLM, to conduct that process. And that's what was put in motion this January. So as you're probably gleaning from already in this presentation, this has been a whirlwind campaign, compressed in a very reduced time scale. And I think it's a testament to just how much local, regional, national attention has suddenly been put on the Amargosa and Ash Meadows. This is just kind of breaking down kind of what I explained, which is just that mineral withdrawal means no new mining claims can be filed in the withdrawn area. And want to be clear there, this is still subject to valid existing rights. So mining claims in the area that have already been validated, those in theory still have a path for moving forward. And I'm going to touch on why that's important in a moment. But this is just a pause button on new mining claims for up to 20 years. And so, as I was saying, I think the reason this issue, this coalition, this campaign has been successful is that everyone's paying attention. I think the fact that this was a lithium issue certainly threw some gasoline on that fire, if you will, because this is a very present issue across the West. I think across the West we are still grappling with how do we extract this mineral, which certainly has utility across our economy in emerging technology, in a way that doesn't permanently degrade or damage the quality of life for Western rural communities, doesn't degrade tribal, cultural, historic values, doesn't degrade biodiversity. And this is not the only issue, of course, in Nevada. We are seeing conflict up at Thacker Pass and around Teams Buckwheat. But I think because of that, Ash Meadows being this vibrant oasis, this home to 26 endemic species, home to 12 endangered species. I mean, this was kind of seen, I think, as a line in the sand. If we are unwilling to shield Ash Meadows from the potential harm that could come from this new lithium rush, then where else are we willing to do it? It was kind of if it can happen here, then it seems to be the case it can happen anywhere. So I think the fact that the administration responded to this request in the time period that they had was a result of the fact that they were drawing a line, saying, "Yeah, you're right. Ash Meadows is too important to lose." And I think it was just incredible to see the work of this coalition and our organization featured in the New York Times and Politico, and continues to be a very surreal thing for our very small, scrappy organization to suddenly be launched into that space. And a lot of you on this call had a lot to do with that. We on the mineral withdrawal frontier, we also had an amazing opportunity in February to participate in a public meeting organized by the BLM. This is something the BLM is obligated to do through this process in analyzing a withdrawal, is they need to host a public meeting and ensure that the public has a chance to multiple chances to express their viewpoint on this issue. And in February 27th, we got this public meeting. We were very nervous because public meetings across the West were being canceled on similar issues. So the fact that ours was moved forward as scheduled felt and feels really big to us. I think, again, it's a testament to the common sense nature of this action. Um, Amazing turnout of this event. We had over 150 people in the small community center in Amargosa Valley. We had folks from Amargosa Valley, Beatty, Shoshone, Tacopa, Pahrump, Las Vegas. We had conservation groups. We had tribal elders. It was a really, I think, a great snapshot of the broader Amargosa community, so to speak. And even more amazing was the fact that of all the public comments submitted that evening, every single one was in ardent support for this action, albeit for different purposes. But no one stood up and said, "No, this doesn't align with our community values." I think everyone at the end of the day, water carried the day. And the truth was that this region, in addition to Ash Meadows being one of the values we don't want to see degraded, the same is true just for life in the Amargosa. Amargosa Valley, Furnace Creek, Shoshone, Tacopa, they only exist because of the Amargosa River. It's only because of that flowing groundwater. So in addition to protecting Ash Meadows, this was an action that was meant to protect the communities as well. And I think that's why it had such, truly, truly absolute support at this public meeting. This was the last big event in this campaign. It's September now. And I'm going to progress the next slide because the question, of course, that all of you should rightfully have is, well, what happens next? We knew that this action being handed between administrations was going to present some risks. Regardless of whether you have a party change, every new administration coming in, has to pick up the strings of the last. And I think in this case, we were always worried that, what happens if the true story of this campaign falls out? We wanted to be sure that the new administration coming in understood that this is a really, truly broadly supported action on the ground, especially by the communities. And we felt that the public meeting was successful in delivering that message. But now it's September, and I'll be honest, after a lot of checking in with the BLM, we have not heard anything that gives us a lot of confidence that we're going to see a positive outcome of this campaign. Now, that being said, I think anything's possible, and this campaign has continued to defy the odds, so to speak. So I'm not going to bet against it. But in terms of what happens next, we are within this 2-year segregation period until January of 2027. So we have about 1 year and 3 months remaining. And the BLM needs to get through a lot of different steps in this process during that time for this to happen. And so we're concerned that we're not hearing about progress being made on this issue. We're hoping that changes. And, frankly, that's one of the big priorities right now is we are doing everything in our disposal to ensure that the local communities especially get access to new leadership within the BLM and the Department of the Interior, who are charged with seeing this action through, to ensure that they can hear from them directly. And that's, I think, one of the big roles that we play as an organization is helping facilitate those conversations. It's something we can provide for local communities. So in terms of what happens next, we continue to put the pressure on in every way we can. And I expect in the coming month or two, there may be opportunities for you as our supporters or as locals, if you choose to raise your voice on this, because we don't want to see this opportunity dry up. It took a lot to get here, and these 2-year segregations aren't just handed out like candy. There's a real fear that if 2 years passes and we don't get this done, it could be a generation before this happens again, or if ever at all. So it really is that monumental an opportunity, and we are doing everything we can to ensure that this stays on track. But I think short of that, it's a great segue into the other threats that we're dealing with in the Save Ash Meadows campaign. I don't think at this point we can count on any future in terms of the withdrawal going through. So we should plan accordingly. And there are projects proposed within the withdrawal area that we are concerned about. We're keeping a close eye on. And that may be very consequential within the broader context of the Save Ash Meadows campaign. One of those is Lawas North America's Amargosa Valley mine. This is for those of you who are maybe local to the area. This mine used to be called the IMV mine. It's been active since the 1950s. It's a claystone mining operation. mining for a variety of clays, some which are extremely rare, it turns out, and are used in a variety of industrial applications and high-end makeup, for example. So there has been active operations in this area for a long time. The Watts has put in a proposal to expand their current project area. Most of this consisted of private lands. These were patented mining claims. There is some now on BLM lands, and the expansion would be entirely on BLM lands in the Amargosa Valley. So that is why this expansion will be subject to segregation currently. And ultimately, if there is a mineral withdrawal, if these claims are valid, there may be a path for them to be developed if that's how the BLM is ultimately permits the situation. Or we hope that every claim in this area is subjected to a validity exam, which is just a kind of more serious interrogation of these claims to ensure that they've met the legal and regulatory standards set in place by the BLM. So this is a proposal that we are monitoring closely. You know, the high level concerns, honestly, is just the location itself in proximity to Ash Meadows and Devil's Hole. This is certainly a hydrologically connected area. There is wetland and riparian habitat over on the right side of the map. That's actually mesquite bosque habitat and part of a area of critical environmental concern that the BLM has established to protect that habitat. So you can see the hydrological connectivity here. In terms of scale, it's hard to tell from these satellite maps. This is within a half a mile, this new expansion of Devil's Hole, so quite close. And ergo, the concerns around impacts to groundwater. This is a map included in Lawast's current proposal that the BLM is evaluating, and it just shows that there's water down there, quite shallow groundwater actually, and that means any level of drilling or open pit mining runs the risk of altering that hydrology in ways that may be difficult to predict, but we certainly still present a lot of risks. I just want to pause quick. I just heard a noise. Morrigan, are you still able to hear me? Am I still online?
Yeah, you're good. I think Ashley logged off.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make totally sure I'm not just talking into the ether, which is what I
No.
do most of the time. All right. So, again, the concern here is just when we alter hydrology in the Amargosa, we know there are consequences. And once you change it, we really can't put it back. So that's why we're concerned about this proposal. There's also language within the submitted expansion plan that acknowledges that there will be impact to groundwater. There are already some pit lakes in the existing permitted area. So they've certainly encountered the groundwater table. And we've also become aware that they're actually then pumping that water for on-site dust suppression. And they expect this will continue to be the case in the expansion area. If it says here, if in some cases excavations are advanced to a depth where groundwater is encountered, then water will be pumped and transferred to an adjacent area to be evaporated or infiltrated before mining activities ceased. And so again, in terms of how big an issue this is, we are still going to follow the science on that. But the truth of the matter is, no matter which way you cut it, there is a groundwater intersection here in very close proximity to the Devil's Hole and Ash Meadows. And therefore, we just feel it's appropriate for us to be concerned and paying attention to it, especially also because it's within the proposed mineral withdrawal area. So it is, in some ways, I think, an important project in terms of seeing how BLM is going to manage valid existing claims, assuming these are valid, within the withdrawal area. So lots to be interested in. I'll share one thing we're working on right now, actually, is working with a hydrologist on an analysis of this proposal. They will be using the best available science, which is the groundwater flow model, the Death Valley regional flow model that's been developed for this region, to determine whether pumping in this area, to see what effects it could have on Ash Meadows and Devil's Hole. So that work is in progress, and we will share that with you as members when available. But this is one of the core parts of our advocacy approach, is we follow the science. And thankfully, we have good tools in the Amargosa for doing this now, which could always be improved. But we are going to be looking at this. And so stay tuned for that. And when the time comes for us to actually handle the expansion, there will certainly be opportunities for our members and for any locals, especially, to certainly attend public meetings and hopefully submit comments reflecting your position on this. So that's one that we are definitely closely taking a look at in the coming year. We have another emerging mining threat in the Amargosa that is relevant to Ash Meadows. You may have seen news recently about this project. It's St. Cloud Mining's Ash Meadows mine. This is an exploration project actually in the California side, so just over the state line divide. It's within 3 miles of the boundary of Ash Meadows National Wildlife Refuge, though, so basically still quite on its doorstep. There's an existing mine that's been in operation since 1983. It's been dormant for much of the last 15 years, and now they're looking at doing some exploration to scope whether an expansion is of interest to them. So the proposal being handled by the BLM Barstow Field Office is 43 drill holes to 200 feet in depth. There also will be water trucked in actually from Nevada, from some water rights holders in Pahrump and Amargosa Valley for construction and other water suppression needs. And the concerns here about this project, in addition to we know that groundwater is quite shallow. We know it's within 200 feet of depth, so we're worried about impact there. But it's also in very close proximity, within half a mile, of critical habitat for the endangered endemic Amargosa niterwort. I mean, this is really the heart of the work that Morrigan is doing in some ways, and our board member, Dr. Naomi Fraga. This is the home of the niterwort, the main population area. And so we're concerned about both hydrological impacts. That's a species that needs very shallow, practically surface groundwater to grow out of these alkali wetlands. So we're concerned about any level of water drawdown in the region could be devastating. We're also concerned about impacts from blowing dust and increased truck traffic. These species are resilient, but they're also extremely fragile. And we are worried about the site location being so close. It's also worth noting the current conservation status of this area. It's within the Amargosa North area of critical environmental concern, and also part of the California Desert National Conservation Land System. So it has robust conservation protections, really kind of preventing almost every use except mining is the only still kind of extractive use of these NCLs, unfortunately. So we're concerned that this is about a mine expansion in an area that's been legislatively designated for conservation protection. It's also an incredibly important cultural area to the Timbisha Shoshone and other tribes. Eagle Mountain, which is pictured here, is very close. It's highly visible from the project area. It plays an important part in as part of their sacred landscapes and storytelling. So there's a lot to be concerned about this project, and we've been keeping an eye on it for the last year or so, and now the BLM has issued a decision. This is just a map kind of showing an aerial view of the project location and its proximity to both Carson Slough, which is this alkali wetland in California, the Amargosa niterwort population area. And on that map on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see Ash Meadows pictured on the north part of the map. The little red diamond here is the site. This photo on the right, I actually took out of the window of a commercial airline flying from Las Vegas to Reno. Thankfully, that flight goes right over the Amargosa, and so I get really interesting views. But I took a photo of this is the existing mine site down in the lower right, and then lower Carson Slough over to the left. So again, the proximity is it's right there. In terms of where this issue is at right now, the BLM Barstow Field Office did approve the exploration proposal. Our organization, Amargosa Conservancy, alongside Center for Biological Diversity and other nonprofits, appealed to the California BLM State Office for a review of that decision, basically giving the BLM a second chance to take a look. And we hoped, be sensitive to our concerns about groundwater impacts to endangered species. And also, this is a little bit policy wonky, but if there are any nerds on the call, this project would exceed the disturbance cap set in place by the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan. If you have no idea what I just said, that's fine. But it's a, kind of basically there is a management plan for this area that we feel legally is being violated by this action. So that's where the issue currently stands. Thankfully, I think even though the decision was approved, despite our concerns, this was another opportunity for the coalition in this region to really step up and make themselves heard on their stance on mining in the Amargosa. So we saw Amargosa Valley Town Board, Beatty Town Advisory Board in Nevada, and also the Nye County Board of County Commissioners as recently as 2 weeks ago send letters of concern to the BLM saying, A, they were not consulted on this project, which is using Nevada water and will have impacts on Ash Meadows. I didn't really mention this. You think about that mine site. I'll just back up a slide as being downstream, south. The Amargosa runs from north to south. So we think about it being downstream from Ash Meadows, and therefore, what possible harm could it cause? But the best analogy I've heard is when you pull the plug in a bathtub, all the water drains. And so, even though this is down gradient, so to speak, from Ash Meadows, an open pit here, if we're pumping a large volume of groundwater in this location, that is going to change the entire hydraulic dynamics of the region and could lead to what we call as known as a cone of depression, basically an area where water that's being pumped causes water to follow the course of gravity and basically fill the void being left by that pumping activity. And so you see a cone form around the place of highest stress. And that can extend outwards over a very long time scale. And that way it can impact groundwater resources both downstream and upstream, so to speak. So that's why it was really heartening to see all the Nevada communities step up and go, no, this is a threat to Ash Meadows. We've made ourselves clear on we don't support mining that impacts groundwater. We also saw actions from the Timbisha Shoshone tribe. Their elders have prepared and sent a letter as well, expressing what this place means to them. So, yeah, it's not a full clean advocacy win, but I'm really really proud to see the coalition really listen to our concerns and to take this action. That I think sets us up really well for when the time comes. And there is a proposal to create an expansion here, an open pit mine. We have on record a very strong coalition united against that action. So this is another one just like the Lost. Stay tuned. We may see something within the next year. Could be longer. We don't know. But we're paying very close attention and we'll be also doing more hydrologic studies of that project to show what effects it could have on the entire river system. All right, how about this? It's 6:45. I've got a little bit to go. Let's take I'm kind of losing my voice. I need a drink of water. So let's take a 2-minute break. Get up, stretch, grab water if you want, come back. I promise we're actually through the majority of the presentation. We're going to touch on a couple more threats, and then we're going to have plenty of time just for some Q&A at the end. Let's take a 2-minute breather, get back here at 6:47, and away we go. All right, Regan, are you back?
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everyone. one of the casualties of being a conservation advocate is I sometimes spend about 6 to 10 hours of my day on the phone talking to people about what we're talking about today. So my voice definitely is taking a beating today. But let's get back into it. We're going to touch on just a couple of other threats. Again, keep questions and everything else coming in from Regan, and we can handle them in just a few minutes. But let's
One
move
second,
upriver.
Mason.
Okay.
You're not sharing your screen right now, just in case you
Thank you.
didn't know.
Thank you. This is going to be way better when I share my screen. So thank you, Regan. That is why you are here. Okay. Now we're all literally on the same page. So let's head upriver to yet another what feels like a chronic mining threat, which is what I'm calling the Anglo Gold Ashanti Industrial Gold Mining Complex. And I'm going to say right off the bat, look, I understand local residents. This is one that our organization has really in the last few years been paying attention to these projects, to the proposals, hearing what the community has to say about the projects and sort of their general position on this company moving in and conducting this work. And the truth is, this one's complicated, but we are continuing to pay attention to these projects because they do propose a potential threat to groundwater resources around the headwaters of the Amargosa River. And additionally, I call this the industrial gold mining complex because, we on this map, this is actually not the most updated map even. This is a complex of six, maybe perhaps as many as seven in the next few months. Potential open pit gold mining projects around Beatty, which is a historic gold mining district. It is a historic mining town. It was founded on gold being present in the Bullfrog Hills and other ranges around the headwaters. And Anglo Gold Ashanti has been active in this area now for really the last 6 or 7 years, especially. They have consolidated projects from several different mining companies, including Corvus Gold, through acquisitions during that time. And the one we're going to focus on, because it's the one currently going through the process of permitting, is the North Bullfrog project. We're not going to get into super depth on this proposal right now. It's still very much changing, in part because we and other partners and the community have raised concerns over groundwater impacts and really insisted that the permitting agencies and decision makers in this space, being both the BLM and the Nevada State Engineer, are utilizing the best available science through the regional flow model to determine what the true scope of impacts could be from what has previously been proposed and is currently being proposed by Anglo Gold. As part of that, we are seeing water rights applications in Oasis Valley. We actually came across some applications from Anglo in earlier this summer in July. We actually worked with our hydrologist to run a simulation of it was 3 different water rights applications. The precise acreage is escaping my mind right now, but it was 3 different applications in the Oasis Valley, just north of Beatty, really along the 95 highway corridor almost. And so our hydrologist ran a simulation for what pumping of those 3 separate water rights applications combined with the potential dewatering from the proposed North Bullfrog mine. And as the map on the right shows, what we found was just those pumping stresses in Oasis Valley could lead to 90 feet of drawdown, meaning a decline in the water table by 90 feet near the headwaters of the river. That is significant. We feel that will certainly have impacts on those regional springs, potentially on water rights users in Beatty, and really the whole river downstream. And so we protested these water rights applications on the basis of, look, the science is showing really significant impact here that we feel at least needs to be further evaluated by decision makers. And ultimately, the company has since withdrawn these applications. So I just use this really as an example of the role that our organization and others play in the region, which is, again, we are trying to follow the science. And if the model shows significant groundwater impact, groundwater is the lifeblood of this whole region. We're going to be concerned, and we're going to try to hold developers and permitting agencies to a very high rigorous standard of review to ensure that both wildlife and the community is not irreparably harmed through this project. This is going to be a multi-year issue. We're going to continue to engage on it, and I think a core role is going to be us producing the science. That's one of the really the main things. One main of the financial needs we have as an organization is continuing to pay for these analyses to be conducted, and they're not inexpensive because they're complicated. So this is a role we're going to continue to play. And we as everyone else would be looking forward to if or when a project from Anglo Gold is officially ready for public review and evaluation. I hope everyone, regardless of your position, plans on attending those meetings and at least asking for transparency in terms of how groundwater impacts are being analyzed, because that's a really, really, really critical piece or a critical test of sort of how management of mining in the Amargosa generally will go in the future. All right, let's talk, and I promise I'm going to be brief. Let's talk about the state of solar energy in the Amargosa River watershed. And I teased with this title of A Second Chance to Get It Right. If you've been following our organization the last few years, you'll know that in addition to the mining threats, we saw the Amargosa Valley and Beatty regions and the Pahrump Valley become suddenly one of the true epicenters of renewable energy interests. We're talking large-scale industrial solar energy projects. This is an image of the Yellow Pine project, which is the only currently constructed operational solar project in the Amargosa. This was a big one to see just the scale of sort of the impact of just a single one of these projects on the region is truly, it was eye-opening. And every time I drive past the project, taking Tacopa Road out to Tacopa, it still astonishes me just how large in scale these projects are and the impact they have on the land. At one point, really, as recently as about a year and a half ago, I was receiving maps from BLM every couple of months depicting the just most recent state of the number of applications for solar energy in the Amargosa. I think at one point, our records, we topped 28 individual project applications between the Pahrump and Amargosa valleys, about a dozen of which were going through some phase of permitting at various times. It was overwhelming, especially as a small organization. When I was just the executive director, we had no other staff in place. Just to get our public comments in was really, really hard for this volume of projects. So this is what we've been bracing for. And then there was a whole process through which the BLM under the previous administration was going to update basically the siting plan that was going to guide how solar energy across the entire Western United States on BLM lands was going to be handled. That had huge ramifications for our region. We saw, it was called the Western Solar Plan, the update to that plan opened up the possibility for over 160,000 acres of industrial solar between the Pahrump and Amargosa valleys, and that includes, the township of Beatty. And we were just extremely concerned about what does even half of that acreage development mean for stresses on water needed for dust suppression for these projects. What does it mean for blowing dust and the impacts on local communities and on wildlife in Ash Meadows? What does it mean for air quality? What does it mean for tortoise habitat? It's kind of mind-boggling to think about what even 80,000 acres of solar energy in the region could mean in terms of really transforming what is currently a very much intact functioning ecosystem. That's where we were a year and a half ago. Things have changed, and the new administration has pretty much taken a 180 from the previous in terms of their willingness to prioritize this form of energy development across the West, across the nation, actually. They have issued a number of both executive and secretarial orders over the last 6 months that make it very clear that the analyses and permitting of these projects is going to be subject to extreme scrutiny. One of these orders actually mandates that the Secretary of the Interior himself, Doug Burgum, must individually evaluate every single project, ranging from every solar and wind project and including transmission. That is going to create a regulatory bottleneck that's really going to slow this down considerably. they've taken other actions as well. They put out some orders that suggest that they are going to be prioritizing energy development on public lands that meets certain quote energy density requirements, meaning what are the forms of energy that require the least amount of acreage to produce an equivalent amount of energy. Solar has a lot of virtues, but it's a fairly big footprint, as we can see here with the yellow pine, as we can see with the scale of development proposed in the Amargosa. So those different actions and generally the messaging we've gotten from the administration indicate that developers for renewable energy have a very steep hill to climb in order to see progress on permitting of projects. We are awaiting a list of projects that actually meet the administration's newest sort of guidelines and milestones. And therefore, these are projects we should, of course, continue to pay close attention to as they either make progress in the next 3.5 years or beyond. But all of this is sort of a way of saying that on this issue on this issue at least, a lot of the pressure has at least temporarily been removed from the region. I feel a lot of ways about it. This is a complicated one. We could spend all night, and maybe we should have. I think actually we should have a separate webinar at some point, really giving solar its due space. This is a complicated one, but what's very evident to me is that, especially the local communities, our tribal partners, and our organization has been very forthright in saying we want to see a balanced approach to energy development in our extremely sensitive region. There have to be places, especially surrounding Ash Meadows and other places, that simply pose too big a risk to wildlife. We have advocated passionately for environmental justice concerns as well, advocating for mandated larger setback distances of these projects from residential areas, because we're concerned about blowing dust and air quality and heat island effects, and generally what quality of life will look like once these projects are built for residents. And so the future of the Amargosa in terms of solar remains very open. And I will say that, again, this is one that we can't just relax on, because politics change quickly. And in 3.5 years, if a new administration comes in with a different set of priorities, we could very easily be back right where we started. For those of you who are local to the area, I'm sure you've seen over the last few months the Green Link West transmission line connecting Reno to Las Vegas. The segment that runs right through the Amargosa Valley is under construction, and that is going to open up the landscape for renewable energy development into the deep future. So we have to remain diligent here. In terms of our organization's specific roles, and priorities right now, we see this as a second chance. It's a way for us to catch our breath slightly, as long as the pressure is off for the moment. And the piece that we've realized has been missing is direct communication with developers, who, assuming there is a path towards them to get projects permitted, we want to ensure that both the environment and local communities are, if not made whole, then at least given something for the sacrifice that they are bearing from this use. And so we're currently working with communities on seeing what opportunities there are for negotiating meaningful community benefit agreements, and maybe getting some great water and wildlife conservation benefits out of these projects as well. Because the truth is, a lot of these developers, they have means, and we want to ensure that if these projects come to fruition, that we have the expectations made clear, that we want to see them be good neighbors to cherished places like Ash Meadows, and to their actual neighbors, their communities in the region. This is a brand new space for us. We are learning every single day about how it's going to work, and in some ways, frankly, folks, we are piloting the work on the renewable energy frontier in a really, really big way, and we have been for the last 3 or 4 years. So it's shocking, terrifying in some ways to see our little quiet river become this hotbed. But I think it also presents opportunities for us to do something really, truly unique and impactful that maybe has never really been done quite like this before elsewhere. We just want to see them get it right. We want to see the balance get right. We don't want to see projects that are going to degrade the things that make life out in the Amargosa worth living. And that's going to take a lot of work. And on, frankly, you as residents, just please continue to pay attention. Ask questions at public meetings. If you go to Board of County Commissioner meetings, contact the BLM, ask them for information, because this is changing literally over overnight right now, but we want to be ready for whatever is ahead. So that is a very boiled down summary of where the renewable energy transition in the Amargosa River is at. I'm going to close by just giving you a really quick sense of how are we navigating all of this, because as you've seen this through this presentation, we have our work cut out for us in the Amargosa. This is not even the totality of threats that we could be engaging on, but these are the ones that we feel are the most pressing. So moving forward, we're going to sustain focus on mining threats to Ash Meadows. This has been our heart and soul for the last few years. And as long as the mineral withdrawal remains in place, or at least is being analyzed as such, we have an opportunity, I think, to still see meaningful conservation benefit happen that takes the threat of mining off the table from these vulnerable places. So we're going to sustain focus on that region first and foremost, because I think it presents us the biggest opportunities to really get good conservation wins. We're going to continue to work with that coalition to expand it, ensuring that tribes, counties, other qualifying cooperative agencies are ready and able to engage with these projects, because they're dealing with so much. We're dealing with so much. But one important role we play is we bring these issues, these threats, these projects, and what we see as opportunities to these communities, and try to empower them to then participate in whatever fashion they want that represents their level of concern and their interests. This term cooperative agencies too is a formal term. It means these are entities that have a bigger seat at the table for projects proposed on public lands. They're able to engage more robustly in every step of the review process. And to be honest, we have actually seen actions in recent months that have reduced or may reduce opportunities for the general public to provide public comments for some of these public lands projects. That's becoming more discretionary for the BLM, and that's concerning. That is such an important tool to ensuring that every single American has the opportunity to make their voice heard on these projects. But in lieu of that, if we're risking seeing maybe a reduction of those opportunities, then we want to ensure that these potential qualifying cooperative agencies have the resources they need to step in and make their voice heard on these issues. As I mentioned throughout this presentation, we're still spearheading the developments of some of the best hydrological science in the region through use of this flow model. And this is, as I said, expensive, but it's necessary. It guides all of our decision making in really choosing which fights we fight, whether they're existential, what the stakes are, what the level of concern maybe should be to local water rights holders. I mean, these tools are everything, and we're very, very fortunate to have them in the Amargosa. But that is one role our org will always play, is moving that frontier of hydrological science forward and using it to inform our decision making and to apply pressure on decision makers. And lastly, and certainly not least importantly, when necessary, we are going to continue to lean on the strength of the Endangered Species Act and other laws under the Federal Lands Policy Management Act, and other processes, because the truth is, folks, especially in the next 3.5 years, a lot of these battles are going to be decided in a courtroom. We have only litigated once in our 21-year history. That was over critical minerals, and it's not something we take lightly. We see it as a last resort when all else fails, when public pressure isn't sufficient. But we will not take that tool off the table if it's the only one that's left to us. And if the science and the law supports us doing it, we value our relationships with our federal agencies, with everyone. And a lawsuit, I mean, there's a joke that goes, well, what's a lawsuit between friends? Well, it changes the dynamic. And it's certainly not how we want to see issues resolved. But I just want to make it clear to you as our members that we are not taking it as a tool off the table, and we will use it if it's necessary in the future again. So very lastly, the path forward. Where do we go from here? And I honestly, this is kind of a summary of what I feel I've learned through these campaigns in the last 2 years, especially the ones that have been successful, which so many of ours fortunately have been. We win when we get to show up and speak the truth. So the more we get to show up in public with developers, with decision makers, and speak to the science, speak to the concerns, the regulations, the law, that sets us up pretty well. We also win when the story gets shared, and that means by media, but that also means just by everyone, locals especially. I can't tell you how many people I've introduced myself to, and they go, "Oh yeah, so and so, my neighbor has told me about the work you're doing." That's valuable. So if you're concerned about these issues in the Amargosa, please just share these stories. Talk to your neighbors. Send them our way if you want. That's what we exist for. But the more you tell the story, the bigger the story becomes, and that's how we start seeing articles in the New York Times. It's only because the local concern is there as well. We win when we have science on our side. I think I've said enough about that. And we win when our decision makers in federal agencies and Congress, and I know this is going to sound maybe trite, but I think it's true. When they hear from people, not just once, but again and again and again, how important these issues are and how earnestly we want to see them handle special, irreplaceable places like the Amargosa with a great deal of care. The more you put the word Amargosa in their mind, and the more that they hear from you as constituents, honestly, the better. So I would just say, please continue to just put that pressure on as an individual. Call offices, send emails. It's important that they hear from you. And I will say, in working with staff in these offices, they read everything, and it does stay with them. So please do that. And very lastly, I would just say, when we win, when we dare to dream for the deep, deep future, and we're not talking the next 3 months, 3 years, even the next 30 years, right? We're looking at all these issues from a deep time perspective of, I want the Amargosa to be there in 3,000 years. I think it's a relic system. It's got all this amazing endemic wildlife, this deep cultural history. It's a very old, very special place, and I want to see that we're willing to dare deep into the future, and that's why we're so concerned about the sheer volume of projects proposed in the Amargosa. This is a critical era. We have to get a lot right, probably the next 5 or 10 years, and we may not get a chance to put it back together if we don't take it right now. So that's really where the organization is landing right now, is on these fronts. And I think I've spoken long enough. Thank you all so much for just hanging in there. I hope this was all interesting. I think you know where to find us at this point. Please stay in the loop, participate in everything, and give to our organizations and others that you believe in, because we really need it now more than ever. We thrive on individual donations. They are the mainstay of our finances, and they allow us to do all of this work needed to engage on all these fronts. So please consider giving if you have the means to give. Even a small amount goes a long way. Don't despair and opt outside. Get out there. If the weather's cooling down, the Amargosa is coming alive, go out to Ash Meadows, go down to the Amargosa Canyon, go get a date shake at China Ranch, go four-wheeling, go off-roading. That's the best possible way to stay involved. So if you do nothing else, go out and enjoy the Amargosa at every opportunity. I know I sure do. And with that, I'm just going to say thank you. And hopefully there's some questions out there. If it's too late for you and you've got a question or you want to set up a time to talk to me, this is my email address. Reach out to me. I talk about this for a living. I love it. So don't be shy. But Morrigan, what's any thoughts or questions out there that we should respond to tonight before we adjourn?
Yeah, so far we just have one question, which you touched on a little bit, from Heather. She is mentioning Greenlink West and how it's still disturbing vast swaths of the land along Highway 95, and she's asking, is there anything that can be done to stop that?
Boy, Heather, that is the question we've been asking, not just us as AC, but as the broader conservation and local community for 5 years. I don't know. I mean, if you're following the news, you'll see that there has certainly been unexpected financial challenges to this project from ND Energy. We're paying attention to how they're handling the situation. I think the biggest thing, honestly, is just to continue to impress upon the BLM and really at your local county level, especially, like, stay involved with Greenlink, because I think there's still opportunities. If it can't necessarily be stopped, again, we want to ensure that, like, it is degrading the quality of life and the experience of the Amargosa and impacts to wildlife to the least possible extent. So it's a great question, Heather. Honestly, send me an email. I'd love to just talk to you offline a little bit. We can go a little bit deeper on that, but it's a big one for sure. Any other questions, Morrigan?
Yeah, one came up from Nick. He's asking what BLM office manages this land, and is it the Barstow office?
Great question, Nick. The Amargosa is a challenging landscape because we actually have four different field offices within the BLM that manage the land. So in Nevada, we have two field offices. We have the Tonopah field office and the Pahrump field office. The Tonopah office will be the ones handling everything around Beatty, so including the Anglo Gold projects. The Pahrump field office is handling everything really basically Beatty south to the state line all the way through the Pahrump Valley. On the California side, we have the Barstow field office, which manages the lion's share of BLM land in the California side of the basin. And then we have the Needles field office, which actually still manages the Kingstons and some areas around Tacopa. So yeah, we have four different field offices that we've got to be tracking and keeping relationships with, and the big challenge, no doubt.
And then we have a question that sounds very knowing from Kane. They're saying, tell us about the award you are receiving next week in South Dakota.
Oh boy. Um, well, I will. I was nominated by my undergraduate institution, Augustana University. It's a small liberal arts college in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I graduated there in 2014, and I actually know Kane because I met his wife at Augustana, or his wife. I met his daughter at Augustana, who now has become my wife. So Augustana is a very special place. I was recently nominated for and have been awarded. It's called the Horizon Award. It's an award for alumni achievement. And I don't really know how it happened. I think it was a professor of mine that I've kept close with, has kind of been tracking what we've been doing here in the Amargosa the last few years, and he put me up for it. And so we'll be celebrating that award next week for homecoming at the college. So thanks for the suggestion, Kane. Yeah, it's a huge honor.
All right. We have no more questions. Lindsay Morales is saying this might be presumptive, but if you ever need a mining rights attorney to consult with, please let her know. And
Send me
oh yeah.
send me an email, Lindsay. Let's talk.
And then yeah, just a lot of thank yous. It looks like people are pretty charged up. So yeah, does anyone have any last burning questions?
All right. Hey, thanks again, everyone. A blast hanging out with you. Stay tuned for more meetings. Have a wonderful night. And again, get out the Amargosa. The getting's good out there right now. So have a great night, everyone. Take care.
Right.